Good evening. I'm live. Hello and welcome. It's Friday night. It's 7 p.m. It is the 25th day of February 2022. It is 55 degrees and clear here in Ventura, California, with this weird cold nor'easter Ragnarok wind cutting through. It's our monthly Fireside chat. It's a chill hour or so to talk about tabletop role-playing game topics in a live stream format. Maybe people will listen. Maybe people won't. Maybe this is a great idea. Maybe this is a dumb idea. I don't know. So the topic of this month was, of course, tabletop role-playing games I absolutely love that weren't 5e. Except, of course, I cheated because the very last one I talked about was, in fact, 5e. So tonight we're going to go down my list of the top 10 role-playing games, my personal top 10 role-playing games of all time and why. And then we're going to talk a little bit about games I feel really broke the paradigm and or the glass ceiling, so to speak. I talk about these games a lot in the blogs, the games I really felt made a difference. A lot, strangely enough, and a lot of them came out about the same time. There's a few that stand out that I think still hold the test of time. Others have sort of washed away. And then if we have time, we might get up on our soapbooks and comment on this week's hullabaloo. But first, for all of you who have asked, here's my personal top 10 role-playing games of all time. Most of these you're going to have heard of. The one or two you might not have, and why. So at number 10, the generic universal role-playing system GURPS by Steve Jackson Games. That is one of my top 10 role-playing games of all time, despite my rather controversial relationship with Steve Jackson Games. I definitely list GURPS also as one of my paradigm shifters. GURPS broke the glass ceiling when it came out. It dominated the gaming market. It came out at a time when D&D was floundering, didn't really know its direction. There was so much stuff going on in the D&D world, and here comes this game. And I mean, at least in where I was, I don't know about the rest of the world. I can only talk about my personal experiences that I had in college and after college, where just everybody jumped on the GURPS bandwagon. Every single gaming group just dropped whatever they were doing and converted to GURPS. Every D&D game converted to GURPS. Every superhero game converted to GURPS. I ended up playtesting GURPS Supers, for God's sake. Every other game, every home game that somebody had whipped up, every post-apocalypse game, every spy. There was a lot of us playing Top Secret at this time, and every game became GURPS. And that lasted for about 5 years, where suddenly GURPS was the center of the role-playing game universe. Everything was being converted to GURPS. And Lord knows, no matter what you say about the system, the source books are amazing. So much historical information, so much fictional information, so much research. I mean, even if you never play GURPS, there's probably a source book that you could use for the game you are playing, because if you ignore the rules, just the amount of research and information in all the source books is just mind-blowing. And they ran pretty cheap back then, 25, 30, 40 pages, chock full of information. I'm very happy for the small part I played in the evolution of GURPS before we parted ways. So yeah, GURPS just happened and it was amazing. And then there's like this 5-year span. Again, remember, this is just my personal experience with GURPS. Your mileage may vary, where just everybody jumped on the GURPS bandwagon everywhere I went. And then just as quickly, it just kind of stopped. I don't know if there were just too many source books. I don't know if people just found better systems. I don't know if just the endorphins wore off and people began to see, the flaws in GURPS, or maybe were getting tired of GURPS, or maybe felt GURPS couldn't give them the experience that other games got. I don't know, just sort of from being the game everybody talked about, GURPS went to being like hardly ever mentioned. And then, other than occasionally seeing a source book and occasionally seeing it mentioned, it kind of just sort of faded away. Not to say it wasn't still out there. I believe it's on its 4th edition, and a lot of people are saying 4th edition is really good. But it just sort of wasn't in the public eye as much. I know people were still playing. I know they were still publishing. So I don't know why. I don't really know why the collective unconsciousness grabbed onto GURPS so quickly, and I don't really know why it faded away. But it did. So that's number 10 of tabletop role-playing games of all time that I love. Number 9 is a tie, Pathfinder and 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. In my mind, Pathfinder was the worthy successor to 3.5. We have 3rd edition, which, was the logical evolution of 2nd edition by the time 2nd edition ended. I know there's people who will argue that, and I know people say that once Wizards of the Coast took over, D&D stopped being D&D. But 3rd edition, at least to me, felt like a logical evolution of where it looked like the game was going. It added a lot of stuff I really liked. But then they went to the 3.5 because, oh no, we made a mistake. There's some editing issues. So we could, A, print out an errata where we address the editing issues and, I don't know, charge you $1. Or we could make you buy all new books because we want you to play 3.5. So that might have been the first sign that Wizards of the Coast didn't really know what they were doing. But yeah, so we all switched to 3.5, and 3.5 was good, and then 3.5 became weird, and then 3.5 ended, and then there was 4th, and that's the whole topic of a completely different vlog we will address again someday. And then, of course, there was the 4th versus Pathfinder. I played both. I liked a lot of stuff about 4th. I didn't like a lot of stuff about 4th. I felt Pathfinder was a worthy successor to 3.5. I felt there was a lot of stuff they did that really worked in the beginning, especially the fact that they made unarmed combat a stat and then just broke down all the confusion of unarmed combat and just do a stat. That alone just made it great. And for a while, Pathfinder was great. It felt like a really decent successor to 3.5. It felt like the 4th edition. While, of course, 4th edition D&D doesn't feel anything like D&D. It is a completely different game from Dungeons & Dragons. I don't care what anybody says. No, I've got one viewer. Ooh, yeah, I didn't really expect anybody. I don't know what it is people want to see. It's hard to compete. I know that Legion of Myth is doing their thing right now, Friday Night Chill Stream, and a lot of people want to watch that because they're way more, yelly and angry and controversial and addressing topics than I am. And I'm kind of more chill and don't really want to yell. Though there might be a rant in here if we have time. So, yeah, Pathfinder was great. And then Pathfinder stopped being great. Hi, Need More Cowbo. How are you? Because it's just too much. A long time ago, I made a vlog that got me a lot of crap about, all these source books were coming out. And I was kind of like, are they sort of trying to make Pathfinder a generic system? Because, there was the espionage book and all these other books that were sort of very specific to one theme. The horror book, the giant robot book. And it sort of felt like they were kind of trying to develop this system where you could do anything with, but still under the Pathfinder banner. So, of course, the problem is that everybody saw those as Pathfinder books and started bringing stuff in from the other books into the Pathfinder core game. And there was nothing really saying you couldn't. I felt it was kind of implied that they were separate, Pathfinder horror and Pathfinder core were kind of separate, but there was nothing saying you couldn't. So I think that was sort of what led to the downfall of Pathfinder. And then, of course, Pathfinder 2nd edition. Same goes with 5th edition. When 5th edition first came out, I loved it. It felt like a return to home. It felt like a breath of fresh air. It felt like the game I loved playing was back for about 2 years. For about 2 years, 5th edition was pretty good. I was playing a lot of 5th edition. It was a lot of fun. We play tested it for about a year. We play tested, we played it. We play tested the D&D Next. Then we played 5th edition for about a year. And before we realized there were a couple things we were doing wrong. And then we were just like, well, we've already set it in stone. So I guess that's just a rule, even if we've been doing it wrong. And then, of course, we know that after about 2 years of playing their hands close to their chests and seeing the direction the industry was going, 5e became the controversial 30-pound elephant in the room that it is. And that's not the point of this vlog, because I've already talked about the reasons I like and dislike 5e. But it does rank as number 9. Pathfinder and 5th edition D&D are tied for number 9 for my all-time favorite D&D role-playing games that I absolutely love, and why. Somebody had asked me to do this list, so this is the list. Number 8 is a game you've probably is also a tie, which actually it's the same game with 2 different names. My experience with 5e is about the same, 2 years and then back to the OSR. Yeah, I would totally agree. I think for me that was my same experience. Not to say that I wasn't playing 5e after that 2 years, but I mean, you've all heard my 5e stories. I'm sure more than once. In that I don't feel I've ever actually played 5e as written. Every 5e game I've played was always trying to attempt to be something else, which I think is part of the problem with why so many people are angry at 5e, is there's this expectation that it's going to be something. And then when it's not that, when it turns out 5e is just 5e, people get upset, and whether that expectation existed before Critical Role. So I'm not blaming Critical Role for that. And of course, I tell the story about the King Arthur campaign I played in, where this guy was just trying so hard to fit the square peg into the round hole of making 5e a human-centric, low magic medieval Europe King Arthur game. And of course, it didn't work because 5e is 5e, and all the players showed up expecting to play 5e. And yeah, so anyways, at number 8, we have a game called Tempenaut, which was created by a friend of mine named Matthew Keating. It was a time travel game. The origins of the game were that we had gone to see Time Bandits at a movie theater, and in the middle of the movie, there was a lightning storm, and I guess the lightning shorted out the film, because this is back in the old days before digital, where film was actually on reels. So we had to leave the theater and we're walking home, and somebody said, Matt, run something. And that became the beginnings of the weird time travel game that was Tempenaut. A bunch of college students who got sucked into a time gate similar to the time gates in Time Bandits, and ended up jumping around the multiverse for a bit. A few years later, I discovered a game called Fringeworthy from TriTac Games, which felt a lot like Tempenaut. It had a lot of the ideas that Matthew had. And even though I didn't recognize some of the names on there, I often wondered if somehow, either through collective unconsciousness or one of the players of that game moved on and went to create Fringeworthy, because it had a lot of the same ideas, but then it also had a lot of ideas that you could say were also seen in Stargate, even though Fringeworthy came out before Stargate. And so it's just interesting. Why is that on my list? Because it had a lot of great ideas that just became ideas that showed up in other games, and it definitely shaped a lot of the early ideas I had on game design and like time travel and powers. And then I really liked Fringeworthy when I saw it. Unfortunately, my original copy vanished. I found the D20 copy, but it didn't feel the same as the original Fringeworthy, or maybe I just remembered it better than it was, because when I read the D20 version, I was like, this isn't the game I remember. But it had one of my all-time favorite quotes in it that I still use to this day. In fact, I used it recently, which is, camping is a cold, wet, miserable way to die. So if no other reason, I love Fringeworthy just for that quote. So I listed it number 8. Take a drink before we hit number 7. Good evening to all of my one viewer. Thank you for being part of the OGGM Adventures Friday night fireside chat. I know you have several choices to listen to tonight, so I'm glad you're taking a moment to listen to me blather on about role-playing games for an hour. Number 7, a tabletop role-playing games I love all time. My top 10. Heroes Unlimited. Oh, yes. Here we go. Heroes Unlimited, how I love you. The most beautiful disaster role-playing game of superheroes. Don't worry. Don't worry, cowboy. We're getting to Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green. I often refer to Heroes Unlimited as a beautiful disaster, as the greatest game that almost was. It is close to as perfect a superhero role-playing game as it could be, if only they had play tested it like one more time and edited it one more time. Because there are so many good, well thought out ideas just such a great reference book, just how meticulously they went through everything. And as I say, every time I talk about superhero role-playing games, which of course we know I'll be talking about a lot in March, I go back to Heroes Unlimited, and I always say, no matter what system I'm running, I will go to Heroes Unlimited for the inspirations, the descriptions of the superpowers alone. I mean, how many times you're playing a superhero role-playing game, and somebody comes up with a question about doing something innocuous with their powers, like, can I use my ice powers to make the drinks in the room cold? Can I use my flame powers to cook the Christmas turkey? It's come up, and there's no rules for that. Except if you go to Heroes Unlimited, they actually did scientifically incorporate actual facts to what you could and could not do with powers like flame control. They were so meticulous. And then just the rules on like cybernetics and vehicle building. It's just brilliant. It could be the greatest superhero role-playing game, except the editing and the layout is awful. The system should be easy to understand because it's just D20 and percentiles, but it's not. You have to go through it over and over again before you finally make sense of it. The editing is just all over the place. I mean, it feels like it just needed one more editing, one more play testing, one more round of just putting it in the right order, and it could have been great. Also, the system's kind of broken. It's very easy to abuse. So again, that's why but just ignoring the bad. And if you want, every Sunday this month, or probably this year, Legion of Myth, Max, and Heathen Dog are doing a complete breakdown of every Palladium game. So if you've never checked out Legion of Myth, that would be a good time. If you're interested in finding out more about the Palladium system, right now they're doing Palladium Fantasy. I'm sure they'll move on to Heroes Unlimited at some point in time. Though if they do Rifts, that's going to take like a year on its own, just doing every Rifts book. So I don't know. So yeah, check out Legion of Myth. Shout out to Legion of Myth. They're doing their Friday night chill stream right now, which is my biggest competition. But if there's anything you've ever wanted to know about the Palladium system, check them out. Heroes Unlimited, number 7 on my list because it's great. It's an amazing system. It's my list of, if I had to get rid of every game book I owned, here's the 3 I wouldn't. And Heroes Unlimited is in that 3 because there's just so many good ideas in it. Number 6 of the all-time tabletop role-playing games in my top 10, D6 Star Wars. This should come as no surprise to anybody. The D6 West End Games D6 system is great. There's just so much tactile fun about rolling multiple 6-siders and seeing those dice explode. No game I have played captures Star Wars the way that game does. There are other systems that have tried Star Wars. People sing the praises of every one. But for me, D6 Star Wars captured the feel of Star Wars, of the Force, of, young nobodies trying to fight against the Empire, and really gave you a feeling of the Star Wars universe beyond just what you saw in the movies and the Christmas special and the early cartoons. Here's a whole bunch of other stuff going. And you wouldn't have the expanded universe, whether it's canon or not. You wouldn't have Thrawn. You wouldn't have Rebels. You wouldn't have any of the other stuff without this game. They are just part and parcel. The expanded universe owes so much to D6 Star Wars, and D6 Star Wars owes so much to the expanded universe. And without the way they sort of fed off each other, without all the information that was in D6 Star Wars, you probably wouldn't have characters like Thrawn, because those came out of the expanded universe, and the expanded universe is directly related to D6 Star Wars. So it is the D6 system I love. It doesn't get enough praise. It's another system that did so much stuff so well. There is very few flaws in it other than damage. I never got into Star Wars or Star Trek. That makes me a bad person, I guess. No, it doesn't. I'm sure there's shows I like that you don't. I'm sure there's shows you like that I don't. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you like what you like. That's nothing wrong. I don't know who's made you feel that way, but I'm sure I do. We know somebody out there who tells you you're wrong. But yeah, no, you're not wrong. Whatever, dude. Who cares? You're not a bad person because you didn't get into Star Wars. I love Star Wars, in case you can't tell. It was my bread and butter as a child. Growing up, it was my escape, much like superhero role-playing games were. And D6 Star Wars definitely captured it. We were supposed to have a guest, but I guess he forgot. Or I had reached out to somebody to talk about Legends of the Flame Princess, and he was going to come on and shill Legends of the Flame Princess, but I guess he forgot. So it's just me, which is fine. So D6 Star Wars at number 6. Number 5 should come as no surprise. Villains and Vigilantes, especially Villains and Vigilantes 2nd edition. One of, if not the best superhero role-playing games ever made. I cannot talk enough about this superhero role-playing game. We know I'm going to revisit in March. What's up, 28 millimeter RPG? Villains of Vigilante, and if you combine V&V with the information from Heroes Unlimited, you have the perfect superhero system. There are hundreds of superhero systems, thousands of superhero role-playing systems, way more than you realize in how many superhero role-playing systems there are out there worldwide. It's amazing that the genre never has caught on more. I've talked about this so many times. You know, I mean, you go to a playground, how many kids do you see dressed up like Lord of the Rings characters or fantasy characters? None. You go to a playground, how many kids do you see dressed up like Spider-Man? Yeah, boys and girls. So you would think that there'd be more people who want to play superhero role-playing games, but for some reason, they don't. And I don't understand why. I guess there's just something more intrinsically attractive to every other system, especially fantasy, than there is wanting to play Batman. Speaking of Batman, Villains and Vigilantes is one of the very few systems that allowed you to create a Superman character and allowed you to create a Batman character, and they were pretty equal. There was both things that they could do, and you never really felt like one overpowered the other. Now, obviously, the system was sort of geared into that high agility speedsters definitely had an advantage over anybody else. It was one of the few things that was broken in the system. There's also some things in the combat rules that really didn't make sense. I've talked about this before, like, you know, when the person tried to mind control the other character with an android body, and the character with the android body's argument was, I don't have a brain for you to mind control. You know, I'm living plastic. So that power shouldn't work. But the DM was like, but I rolled it, so it did work. It's like, no, but you don't have that defense. Well, you know, I should, because I don't have a brain. So yeah, there was some flaws. You know, none of these systems are perfect. I found a lot of rules like Mutants and Masterminds convoluted and irritating to read. I hear the current edition of Mutants and Masterminds is excellent. I have the 2nd edition. Of the OGL games, I would rate, you know, Mutants and Masterminds in the top 5 of all of the games that came out of that mess, top 10, top 5. But if there's anything wrong with Mutants and Masterminds, is it's trying too hard to be D20 champions. A lot of the superhero role-playing games that are D20 try and be D20 point-based champions, and you can't really do class-based D20 D&D mentality and point-based champions mentality, and they just kind of don't work together. But I hear good things about Mutants and Masterminds 3. I have Mutants and Masterminds 2. I don't like the system, but there's good resources in it that I can curb. Villains and Vigilantes was definitely my go-to. It's 80% of my gaming life. Every game I played before college was way more Villains and Vigilantes and way more homebrew superhero games than I ever played D&D. I wasn't, you know, I mean, there's playing D&D, but it was always V&V first. In college, until GURPS hit, nothing but V&V. And then after college, it was mostly D&D. So yeah, I would say 60, 70, 80% of my role-playing life is Villains and Vigilantes, which is why it's number 5. Number 4 is another game that I consider a trendsetter, a glass ceiling shattering. It should become some as no surprise to you. The number 4 on my list is Cyberpunk 2020 from Artisolian Games. I would list that game as one of the most influential tabletop role-playing games of all time. It shattered the glass ceiling. It introduced the idea of cyberpunk and the alternate ideas that it brought with it to a mainstream public. I don't think you would have the cyberpunk fad without Cyberpunk 2020. I don't think you would have had GURPS Cyberpunk without Cyberpunk 2020 and what Mike Poundsmith did with Cyberpunk 2020. And without GURPS Cyberpunk, you wouldn't have had the FBI raiding the state studios of Steve Jackson Games. Cyberpunk became my life for some reason. It's not, I mean, I was punk. I grew up in the Valley in the 80s, as a disenfranchised kid who was constantly getting bullied because I liked D&D. And the music I was listening to was 1970s, early 80s, easy listening pop. I loved ABBA. And then I discover, the Ramones on, K-Rock late at night. And, I discovered Dr. Demento. And next thing I know, I'm listening to the Sex Pistols. I'm listening to the glam rock. Suddenly, I'm the kid who, now is the rebel and the Satan worshiper instead of the kid everybody beat up. So, yeah, I was borderline punk before college. But during college, once I discovered cyberpunk, I went full on. I created the cyberpunk dictionary. I wrote for Artisolian and I wrote for Fusion. I wrote for Cyber Generation. I commented on so many different cyberpunk magazines and websites back then. I'm probably one of the few people who's ever seen Church Windows. I think there's 8 of us who ever actually saw Church Windows, the cyberpunk soap opera that was on for 20 minutes way back when, overloaded at the memory drive. I'm probably one of the only memory bank. I'm probably one of only 10 people who's ever saw that movie. Gideon's Run. I wrote that. That's considered a great cyberpunk movie, even though I'm sure there's 5 people who've seen Gideon's Run. So yeah, Cyberpunk 2020 became my life. I was just into cyberpunk. I was, something about it. And then I left college and had to join the workforce. And of course, you can't really be cyberpunk when you're working 9 to 5 at the video store like everybody else in the Valley, because apparently that's a rule that if you live in the Valley, you have to work at a video store. And then, everybody was playing D&D. So being the one cyberpunk kid at the D&D table kind of didn't really fit. And so I just found a different, style. But I still love the music and I still love the genre. And who knew? I mean, Gibson was right. We live in cyberpunk. Everything Blade Runner predicted. You go to Tokyo, Japan, there it is. There's the city from Blade Runner, minus the giant glass pyramids spouting out flame in night and the Vangelis soundtrack. But other than that, and no flying cars yet, really. We're close, but not like the flying cars, Replicants, fuck, we're so close. The robot, have you seen some of the lifelike robots? I'm not talking the sex dolls. I'm talking like the creepy ones. Genetic building 3D body parts. Everything Gibson predicted is either come true or really damn close. So yeah, it was kind of hard to be cyberpunk when cyberpunk was becoming the real world. So number 3 of my all-time favorite games, Tales from the Loop. I absolutely love Tales from the Loop. From the very first moment I saw my very first piece of Slog's art, I can't pronounce his name, the Tales from the Loop, it just captured my soul in the way very few things have. Not since, as far as role-playing games, there's only 2. Other tand Dungeons and Dragons and V&V, none have really captured my imagination the way Tales from the Loop. Blade Runner was everybody's introduction to cyberpunk. I'm pretty sure, unless you were lucky enough to live in Japan, and then it was Ghost in the Shell, but you wouldn't have Ghost in the Shell without Blade Runner. So yeah, Blade Runner introduced the genre, I would think. But there's a lot of other things happening, especially in the punk movement. And I just, cyberpunk is a reaction to the sudden evolution of technology that we were seeing at that point in time. Coming out of the 70s, going into the 80s, technology was kind of, stagnant. And then suddenly, bam, everything changes. There's just an explosion. So cyberpunk was a direct response to everything that was going on in the 80s. Also just technology in the world, politics. And now here's this genre that says, let's take everything and then move it forward 100 years and see what happens. But yes, number 3, Tales from the Loop. you hear me? I mean, not just the Gear Zero system, which I think is great. There's a reason why Free League Publishing knocks it out of the park every year, has won so many awards. I mean, for what? The past 2017 Game of the Year, Free League Publishing. 2018 Game of the Year, Free League Publishing. 2019 Game of the Year, Free League Publishing. 2020 Game of the Year, Free League Publishing. 2021 Game of the Year, Free League Publishing. Most anticipated game for 2022, Blade Runner the role-playing game, brought to you by Free League Publishing. They are the current kings of the hill. They just need that one thing to make them worthy contenders to D&D. Will it be Blade Runner? I know a lot of people are upset that Blade Runner is the single most anticipated tabletop role-playing game of 2022 and not D&D. Apparently, I mean, either people have said, oh, no, it coming out is problematic. I don't see how it's problematic because Wizards of the Coast aren't making any new games. They're making supplements for D&D. Tales from the Loop / Blade Runner is a game. And I love the fact that they have their own little timeline going on. It goes Tales from the Loop, Twilight 2000, Mutant Year Zero. They're telling a story, and the system is great. And just, it is hard for me to put what Tales from the Loop means to me just artistically. Something about his art, the style, it just captured my heart, my imagination. It was like diving into a cold, fresh pool of water. Every time I look at it, I am just swept away into that world. So it is definitely in my top 3 list. I mean, if there was games, if I could only take 3 tabletop role-playing games with me when, the aliens took me or whatever, it'd be Heroes Unlimited, Tales from the Loop, and of course my next game. All right, so number 2, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, you have to give us call a spade a spade. It's my favorite version of Dungeons and Dragons. It's the version that I played the most. For me, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is D&D. Most of the OSR games I like are either retro clones of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or retro clones of, classic D&D. It's the one I played the most. I mean, 15 years long playing AD&D and then third edition with TJ Storm and the Company of the Bull. Of course, it's going to be number 2. There's only one other game that beats it, and it's the game I talk about the most. And if you've ever been on my vlog long enough, you would know that my number 1 tabletop role-playing game of all time, drumroll please, favorite Marvel superheroes. That's it. I mean, I thought about this list all day yesterday, all day today. What is the game that I most go back to? What is the game that first pops up in my mind when I say, think, what is my favorite role-playing game of all time? Because I love Tales from the Loop. I love Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I love Cyberpunk. I love Heroes Unlimited. I mean, I'll defend Heroes Unlimited to the day, forever. It's in my top 3. Marvel Phase Rip is, as far as I'm concerned, the one of, if not the greatest superhero role-playing game ever written. And it is my all-time favorite role-playing game. Now, I know people are like, well, why not D&D? Well, that's number 2. But really, and remember, my experience is unique to me. There are hundreds of great superhero role-playing games with better systems. But as I've said hundreds and hundreds of times, at least from my personal experience and the experiences that I had with the people playing it, no superhero role-playing game captured the feel of a comic book like Marvel Phase Rip. And you break it down into one simple thing that I have said time and time again, and I know people don't agree with me. I don't care. It used words instead of numbers. You read a comic book, you don't see Spider-Man punching a guy with his 18 strength or jumping over the cliff with his 15 dexterity. It's always described in words like excellent, amazing, heroic. He's the amazing Spider-Man, not the guy. Spider-Man has straight 18s. He's not the 3rd level thief Spider-Man. He's the amazing Spider-Man. He lives in this world of colors and words, and those words inspire you in the way that a 16 never can. I lift the car with my 20 strength. Whatever. Okay. Yeah. I lift the car with my Hulk-like strength. That is just so different. Nothing No game, I think, has captured superheroes, captured the feel the way Marvel Phase Rip did. And that's why it's number one. Now, obviously, I none of this would exist without Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeons and Dragons exists in its own little place, but it's not, I could live without D&D. It's fine. My feelings for D&D are like, yeah, whatever. There are better games. There are worth games. I enjoyed my D&D time, but there's always games that did what I wanted to do better than D&D. There were games that did fantasy better than D&D. There were games that did science fiction better than D&D. D&D does not work as a superhero game because just reasons I've gone into, even though they've tried multiple times. So yeah, obviously D&D is technically number one because I wouldn't exist in the hobby without D&D. But just for spiritual all-time favorite, it's Marvel. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Well, this is my opinion. So really, your top 10 would probably be different. Feel free to post your top 10 role-playing games of all time on the vlog. Subscribe to the vlog if you haven't subscribed yet. Help me hit 1,000 subs. Thank you to all three of the people listening to me. I know you had choices tonight. You could have been over at Legion of Man Myth, listening to Max and those guys talk about stuff, or Table Breakers, or whoever else is broadcasting this evening. So I'm very thankful you chose me at the 36-minute mark. And this list might change. I might look at the Blade Runner role-playing game or the Avatar the Airbender role-playing game and go, wow. It'll be hard for me to ever feel about a game the way I felt by Tales from the Loop, but you never know. There could be something coming down the pike that just goes bam and captures my heart. But really, it's going to be hard. So once again, going down the list, number 10, GURPS. Number 9, Pathfinder 5th edition. Number 8, Fringeworthy / the game it was based upon, Temponaut, a home game created by Matthew Keating during my years in college. Number 7, Heroes Unlimited. Caveat: if Heroes Unlimited ever got rewritten, edited, and made the way I think it could be made in my mind, it would jump up to my top 3. So much wasted potential. Number 6, D6 Star Wars. Number 5, Villains and Vigilantes, especially Villains and Vigilantes 2nd edition. Yes, I will revisit the new version during March. Don't worry. Number 4, Cyberpunk 2020. Of course, it was my lifeblood for a while. Number 3, Tales from the Loop. Number 2, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And number 1, Marvel Phase Rip, my all-time favorite role-playing game. Now, my list of all-time favorite role-playing games and my list of role-playing games that I think are the ones that really shook the world. And this list is completely subjective, but yeah. Indigo Dragon, hello! I like Marvel Phase Rip. Ascended is my favorite Supers RPG now. No game does comic book physics better than Ascended. I was told I wouldn't like it because it's very number crunchy, though it is selling like hotcakes on drive-thru, so I might have to pick it up. Of course, I've got the new Marvel playtest coming sometime in late March, early April, so that's going to take up most of my superhero time, but eventually I'll get around to seeing Ascended. Everybody says good things about it, but everybody has also said it's very number crunchy, and I wouldn't like it because of that. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, great game. Paranoia, oh, so much fun. OSR D&D, and Delta Green. Yes, we're getting to Delta Green / Call of Cthulhu in just a second, but yeah, Call of Cthulhu. Okay, so speaking of Delta Green / Call of Cthulhu, this is my list of games that obviously shatter the glass ceiling, had most influence, especially when they came out. Obviously D&D, but yeah. So Call of Cthulhu, the number 2 role-playing game in the world. Suck it, Scott Garrity. Suck it long and suck it hard. Call of Cthulhu kicks D&D's ass everywhere except America. It is considered by far one of, if not the best role-playing game of all times. Every time you hear people talking about, the system I can do anything with, it's inevitably Call of Cthulhu. Why is it number 2? Why is it consistently number 2 everywhere? Is it because people really like the idea of playing a person that's doomed to go insane? No. Is it because people really love the world of H.P. Lovecraft and tentacles? Well, the Japanese But I mean, yeah, who knows why? Um, but it's number two for a reason, and nobody has done what Call of Cthulhu does. Has consistently remained the number one competitor in sales and popularity to D&D. And when D&D was floundering before 5th edition and Critical Role, Call of Cthulhu was number one. Yes, I hear nobody has said anything bad about it. They just say I wouldn't like it because I don't like number crunchy systems. I don't like champions. I don't like GURPS supers, despite my association with GURPS supers. I don't like point-based systems. Because of the way my brain works. But I have heard nothing about good things about Ascendant, and it's selling like it's platinum sells consistently. It's the number one selling superhero role-playing game right now in drive-through. So I got to get around to seeing it at some point in time. See, Call of Cthulhu is the father of narrative RPG. Games that are deadly tend to be heavily narrative games. Did Call of Cthulhu come out before Amber or after Amber? Because I think Amber Diceless is one of the first narrative RPG games. But yeah, Call of Cthulhu. There's, I mean, don't listen to me. Just listen to the entire industry. It's the go-to. I mean, if I had to only bring one game with me, and I was challenged with what system can you run any genre with, but you can only bring one game. It'd either be D6 Star Wars or Call of Cthulhu, because I can run any genre with D6 Star Wars, and I can run any genre with Call of Cthulhu, but Call of Cthulhu kind of takes the lead. So yeah. Anyone who claims Ascendant is too crunchy or numbers heavy has not played it. It is slick and fast. I'll have to play it. I'll have to see it. I'll pick it up. Right now, money is tight because I'm moving, but once everything gets settled, it's definitely top of the list. Thank you, Indigo Dragon. Okay. So yeah, obviously Call of Cthulhu would be my number one. Number two, Vampire the Masquerade. Is there, other than Call of Cthulhu, is there anything that has changed the shape of the role-playing world? I mean, we wouldn't have all this Strixhaven pillars of character interaction bullshit without Vampire. Yes, narrative role-playing existed before. Amber Diceless is 1982, I believe. And even in the early 80s, there was the movement of more narrative-driven role-play. That was the beginning, early days of the Forge / Fate, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, Vampire the Masquerade brought people to the table that otherwise might not have come, and allowed people to feel comfortable. And yes, it brought women to the role-playing games, but it brought people of color. It brought a lot of LGBTQ people to the game. It made people feel comfortable because at that time, D&D had a negative, I mean, it still does, negative connotation that it was the rich white nerd game and nobody else was allowed to play, which is of course completely untrue, because every D&D table in the world in the 80s, if you walked by and showed even 1% interest, they would invite you, because they were always looking for more players, male, female, it didn't matter. I mean, especially girls, because, well, girls, but people, everybody was welcome at the table. And I played with a gauntlet of individuals before Vampire. There was girls, there was people of color, there was people of all ages, there was people of multiple genders. I used to play D&D with drag queens and porn stars. But Vampire made people feel comfortable and allowed them to feel welcome at a table where other games they might have not felt they were, and allowed them to become who they were. And especially for a lot of people dealing with sexuality and gender issues in the 80s, Vampire allowed you to feel comfortable in exploring that in a way no other game before it really did. The storytelling system just dripped storytelling. So yeah, it changed the game. It changed the world. It's still changing the world, even despite, say what you will, all this lasers and feelings, Strixhaven, pillars of interaction, dramatic narrative role play would not exist without Call of Vampire. Then, of course, GURPS. I've already talked about why GURPS, shattered the glass ceiling. GURPS came out, changed the world. Everybody jumped on the GURPS bandwagon, and then just as quickly, sort of just faded away. Cyberpunk, same thing. The time it came out, it created a genre, it created a niche that opened the world and showed you a different side and a different system, and just allowed you to play various possibilities that you might not have felt were available to you before. It changed the world. I mean, if not for Cyberpunk, you wouldn't have had GURPS Cyberpunk. You wouldn't have had the Secret Service raiding Steve Jackson games, Cyberpunk. I mean, people are still doing Cyberpunk games, so the genre still holds some fascination. Powered by the apocalypse, especially with Avatar the Airbender coming out, I think that's going to be it. Avatar the Last Airbender tabletop roleplay game playtested was the highest Kickstarter for a tabletop role-playing game ever at almost $10 million. $10 million Kickstarter for an Avatar the Last Airbender role-playing game. The only other thing that has made that much money on Kickstarter was the Vox Machina stuff, Critical Role. And technically Vox Machina made more, but it wasn't a role-playing game. Avatar the Airbender has made the most money for tabletop role-playing games so far on Kickstarter, and the system it's using is Powered by the Apocalypse. Powered by the Apocalypse has the potential to be the next GURPS. Powered by the Apocalypse has the potential to shatter the glass ceiling. It's just missing something. From the very first time I read it, if you ignore the stupid sex rules in Apocalypse World and Monster Hearts, I knew even then, this is it. This is the game that could be the next GURPS. It's just missing something. And this Avatar The Last Airbender could be it. What games would you buy if you had limited time and someone else's debit card that I don't already own? If there's a game out there I don't already own that I would buy if I only had a limited amount of time and stuff, I would say, well, a copy of the Morrow Project would be probably the top of my list. A copy of the original Marvel rules. I mean, my rules that I have right now are just PDF. I don't have my book anymore. I would probably be in the top list. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, I have Fringeworthy. That one took me a while to find, so Marvel would be definitely on the list. A good, decent copy of the original Marvel books. A copy of Morrow Project would definitely be on the list. A copy of the old GURPS stuff that still has my name in it, and Cyber Generation that still has my name in it, because I don't have any of my copies of the GURPS books that I worked on that still have my name in it. The new copies don't. My name is not in GURPS Time Travel or in GURPS Martial Arts, and I fucking wrote GURPS Martial Arts. Between me and John Arruda and TJ Storm, we wrote that, and none of our names are in it anymore. So, yeah, I would definitely want copies of those. Unfortunately, all of mine were up at Thompson at my parents' house in the attic and burnt up in the 2018 fire. So, yeah, those would probably be it. Avatar RPG is just mass RPG with the Avatar look. Nothing about it is original. I believe most of the backers were box inflating the Kickstarter to make it look way better. I don't have anything to say about that because I haven't seen it. There have been other Avatar-related Kickstarters that didn't do that well. We'll see. I mean, $9 million, so we'll see what happens. Maybe it is a piece of crap. I don't know. I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping it is the game. If it's not the game, then it'll be Blade Runner, which is also on my list. The Year Zero system, again, just needs that one thing to shatter the glass ceiling and become the next GURPS, become the game that could be the competition for 5e, even maybe knock 5e off of its pillar, because it's going to happen. Something's going to come along and knock 5e. 5e will have to dwindle. I mean, D&D has always had burst of popularity and then just dwindles away. I mean, right now it's in the public eye, but it's not in the public eye the way it was a year ago. People are starting to complain about it, so it just needs something. So it could be Powered by the Apocalypse. It could be Year Zero. I don't know. There's other games that I think, have shattered the glass ceiling or had the potential of the glass ceiling. But there's just that the holy trio of games that came out in the 80s and really late 80s, early 90s shaped gaming the way it is today. And that's GURPS, Cyberpunk 2020, and Vampire the Masquerade. So many other games owe their origins to that. And of course, the Forge movement, like it or hate it. A lot of the narrative, bunnies and unicorn style of role playing, especially a lot of the ones we're seeing right now, owe their origins to Vampire, owe their origins to the Forge and that stuff. I mean, there were great ideas before Solomon and those guys ruined it, but that's neither here nor there. It's almost 8 o'clock. I thought I was going to have some guests, but I guess nobody wants to talk about tabletop role-playing games that they absolutely love. So, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I didn't really expect. Next month's topic will be, of course, superheroes. Mega March. Every March, for as long as I've been doing this, I focus the entire month on Mega Dungeons and superhero role-playing games. So, of course, I will be talking a lot about Heroes Unlimited and Villains and Vigilantes. I will reread G-Core and the Protector's World. I will make some random superhero characters and post them. Bunnies and Burrows and Fuzzy Heroes are still out there. Wow. I haven't heard Bunnies and Burrows mentioned. Bunnies and Burrows, Mouse Guard, anthropomorphic animals. They're still making a lot of anthropomorphic animals. What was the one? Wander Home, considered one of the top games of 2021. It's basically Bunnies and Burrows again. A bunch of animals trying to find their way home. So, in these last few minutes before I shut down for the evening, I guess I should take a moment to get up on my soapbox and address this week's controversy, which I inevitably find myself in the middle. And of course, I'm regarding the whole immersion bullshit thing. So there seems to be this argument floating around back and forth about immersion in role playing. And one guy did a video about it, and then the other guy did a video saying that guy was wrong. And then the other guy did a video, and then that guy said, no, that guy's wrong. And then somebody else posted on that guy's thing, and then that guy did a video. I did a video, and apparently my video is wrong, even though I didn't actually say anything that they were saying. I just said, I think you're using the word wrong. And I still think you're using the word wrong, because if the actual definition of immersion is submerging something in water, which, unless you're playing tabletop role playing in a pool, very little of our hobby has anything to do with submerging an object in water. Now, what they're talking about, of course, is submerging yourself in the game, immersing yourself in the game. And there's multiple arguments. Now, the problem with this argument is a lot of people are cherry picking definitions to defend their state. And it's easy to cherry pick a definition. You just look at the list and find the definition that most fits your argument. They might not even be doing it consciously, but and it's just human nature. You want to find something that backs up your argument. So you're going to look at a list of facts, and consciously or unconsciously, you're going to find the one that best fits your argument against the other person. And again, the trouble is with this whole immersion thing is immersion is subjective. So there's no right definition. First, definitions of words constantly change. What the word meant 5 years ago and what the word meant today, completely different. Words disappear from the English language. constantly. Words appear. There are words in the dictionary now, in the 2021, 2022 dictionary, that weren't in the dictionary 5 years ago. And there are words missing because language changed. So sure, you could find the definition of the word that fits your argument. But unfortunately, the problem is with perception is subjective. And as I said in my, discussion I was having with another guy about immersion and perception, is you and I could sit down in a clean room, no outside interference whatsoever, completely white room in the bunny suits, nothing from the outside world talking us, a shower of white noise, have the exact same text printed out the exact same way at the exact same time in front of us. We would each sit across from each other in a little white table with a table separating us, no interaction with each other, read the exact same text at the exact same time. And then if somebody asked us about that text, our response would be completely different. Doesn't matter, because the way we perceive reality is unique to each and every one of us and is shaped by an infinite amount of things. Who I was 5 seconds ago is not the same person I am now. That's not blathering spiritual bullshit. That's a fact. Our brains are constantly evolving. The way we perceive reality is constantly evolving. The way I perceive reality and the way Needmore Cowbell perceives reality is completely different. So his immersion and my immersion were going to be completely different. And that guy's over there and that guy's over there. Immersion is going to be completely different. So there's no right answer, because there's nothing about this hobby that involves us sinking into the bottom of a swimming pool. That's a completely different game. And I don't know why people feel the need to make videos about the other guy being wrong. It's like the theater of mind versus miniatures thing. You're wrong. If you don't play the game the way I think you should play the game, you're wrong. Which I think is just all, like I keep saying, all this breaks down. Like the number one topic I think I've been talking about in 2022 is these individuals who feel that if you don't play the game their way, you're somehow wrong, which of course is complete and utter asinine, because one, it's a game. If you're having fun playing the game, who cares? If your people you're playing with are having fun, who cares? Two, the my version of the game, your version of the game argument has been going on since day one. We've had edition wars and table wars forever, but it's never been as ugly as it is now. And of course, that's because the internet allows us to anonymously vomit up as many insults and opinions as we want with very little reaction. I'll post a video. So I'm sure somebody will post a troll video about this video saying my list is wrong. My opinion on immersion is wrong. My opinion on figures versus theater of the mind is wrong. My opinion on what's going on in Ukraine is wrong. And then they'll call me a bunch of names like idiot and imbecile and uneducated. And they'll make 20 videos about how I'm wrong and they're right. And if I say anything about them, they'll say, oh, no, you're attacking me. So, yeah, I find myself in the middle of this immersion thing, and I'm just like, it's not a thing. Why make a thing out of it? Are you enjoying the game you're playing? If the answer is yes, then that's it. That doesn't matter. How you experience your game is going to be completely different than how I experience my game. So there is no right or wrong way to experience the moment at the table. Therefore, immersion is not really the word. I think it's investment, suspension of disbelief. Vermicitude is one word, somebody. Absorption of the moment. Though, again, absorption means you're taking in water, and that has nothing to do with playing D&D unless you're playing D&D in a swimming pool. So really, it's just how an investment and perception of the experience is, I think, what people are trying to say. But they're cherry picking the definitions of immersion. And it's not like you're doing anything wrong. You may not even be consciously aware of it. I know I cherry picked my definition to fit my argument. It's just how our brains work. I know I'm blathering. I'm sorry that I got involved in this. Ideological extremism is the ultimate evil. Do you? Yeah. Probably, I agree. Just turning something simple into an ugly series of just attacking other people and telling them they're wrong and they're stupid just because you think you're so extremely committed to that you're right. Where I'm on the I don't care side. I mean, if your argument's good, I'll listen. If you have advice that I think will make me better at what I do, great. If you enjoy what the words that are coming out of my mouth, then support me, sub to the vlog, and hopefully if I say one thing that you actually appreciate, then I've done my job. Everything else is just unicorns and rainbows. Remember, I'm an idiot. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. All this is just my ideas based upon my life. Your experience will vary from mine. So you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to any of these people. Just play the game the way you want to play. Make your own top 10 lists and share it with me on my vlog, and I will appreciate it. Unless you pick lists Fatal as one of your favorite games, then we might have some minor difference of opinion. But yeah, so that's my soapbox, I guess, for the moment. Thank you for sticking with me. I am actually going to figure out how to end this broadcast the right way. I'm sorry we didn't have more guests. I was supposed to have guests, but I guess they either forgot or they just didn't want to share their experience. So I'm not going to keep this on for 6 hours, though I'm sure I could. But, that's not what I'm about. Like I said, 90% rent free, nothing but love for 5e, nothing but love for 4e, nothing but love for the game. As somebody once called me, I'm the OGGM love train. And that's what my channel is about. And that's what these Friday night live streams are about. Just loving the hobby for what it is and talking about the hobby and finding ways to build better traps and look at rules that we love without arguing. I guess I know I'm going to be called out for not taking a side, but you know what? That's not the point. If you want me to have a I take a side channel, I'm sure I could make one and blather on multiple times a day about what I think is right. And I'm sure there's an audience for that, but that's not what I want to do. At least not with this channel. Enough of my other real life is too negative. So yeah, you don't care. Shut up, OGGM. Shut up. You're blathering. I apologize. Okay, well, hopefully everybody had a great week with everything going on in Europe. Stay safe. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So just, have a great rest of February. And don't forget, join me March 1st when we once again embrace all things superhero role-playing games and embrace the idea of the ridiculousness that is Mega Dungeons for Mega Dungeon March, the theme of March. Of course, I will still always be your guide to all the tabletop role-playing game news, weather, sports, and general internet nonsense that is the OGGM. If you appreciate the words that are coming out of my mouth, take a moment to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me reach that goal of 1,000 subs. We're hoping to reach 1,000 subs by August 4th, 2022, in which part I will do something crazy like, I don't know, buy a house, go to Disneyland, shave my head, eat a ghost pepper, show my cat on the camera. Something crazy if I reach 1,000 by August 4th. Till then, feel free to check out my fellow YouTubers, Legion of Myth. If you want to know anything about the Palladium system, head on over to there. These links are always on my channel. Aaron the Pendantic, if you want to know anything about Dungeon Crawl Classic or just general fun stuff. Of course, Grim Jim and Pundit, Venger, all these great guys who are just making great content out there and need your support. Till then, in the immortal words, get off my land, you damn marks. See ya.